Hey people, it's Marc again, Change Academy, with a workshop or a little bit of training on one of the new counselling units, in this case CHCCSL007, as I call it, the James Bond unit. It's the replacement for the old CHCCSL007B, and it's still to do with helping clients make decisions. So that's this one, Introduction to Decision Making. Now, I'm on the back end of a cold, so I might sound a bit waffly and break out in coughing every now and then. I hope not. But we'll go through it fairly quick. Again, this is just an overview training session to give you an idea of this unit and how to get through it easily. Okay, here we go. In your previous learner guide, that must have been 001, I think, you will have learned about how to actually get information from clients and how you run a session. How do you do a counseling interview? By initiating the session, gathering data, goal setting, working and ending, or relationship building, storying, trying to help them transform, and then moving into goals, and then ending the session. Now, this book, or this booklet, and the purpose of Unit 507 old and 007 new is to help people make decisions. So what is decision making? What does it involve? Well, I've highlighted a couple of things here. It's trying to change the nature of a situation so it doesn't any longer present a problem, or changing a reaction to a problem so the problem doesn't go away, but your response or reaction to, or ideally helping to change the problematic situation and changing someone's opinion about it. So that would be the ideal situation, obviously. All right, we'll go through this pretty quick. Styles of decision making. Now, some people naturally are quite rational when it comes to do decision making. It's just based on logic and logical explanations. Other people are a bit more intuitive about what feels right. Other people are dependent, will want to have advice from other people before they make decisions. Other people don't like to make decisions at all and will do it at the last minute, which would be an avoidant decision-making attitude. And yet other people are more spontaneous. They let the moment decide what it is that they are going to do. Now, in counseling, if you have awareness of a client's decision-making style, it will help facilitate the counseling process, obviously. If you know how a person makes decisions, and I know that for a fact, if you know that you got a person at your table in your counseling room who's more of a logical, rational person, then you don't want to come with touchy-feely stuff. Conversely, if you have a person who makes decisions generally based on feelings and on values, you don't want to do all that heady stuff and just have them all rational and all left-brain logical, because you're not in touch with them and you lose that therapeutic relationship, and that's always what you want to have. So it's a good thing to find out. So have a read of that one. We'll work a little bit with that when we go further down into this unit on the Zen Model and the decision-making, or the decisional balance, decision-making tools, etc., etc. But it's good to find out how people operate, and generally you can hear it in their voice. The words they use will often indicate what type of decision-making style they have. Often it's like, it doesn't make sense, or that's not logical, or I need to think about that, or give me the facts and I'll figure it out. That or generally will indicate a more rational decision-making style. Whereas if you hear people talk about, it just doesn't feel right, it doesn't sit right with me, I have to sit on this for a bit, or I have to get in touch with my feelings on this one, or I'll have to find out what's really important to me, then you pretty much obviously know that a person is more intuitive about their decision-making style. And there's a lot of research and a lot of extra sort of skills you can pick up on that one. It's interesting to find out. Listen to your clients. They tell you a lot. Rightio. Now, decisions, they say here, are not made in a vacuum. That's kind of obvious. Because they're not made in a vacuum and they're very contextual, it is good to have a structured decision-making process in your toolbox as a counselor. So you can help clients identify what it is that they would like to achieve, explore various options, and ultimately make a decision on which option is most appropriate, for the situation that they're faced with. So as counseling is structured, you like decision making to be structured as well. All right, forgive me, I'm going to take a quick swig of my coffee and I'll be back. Right, that feels a lot better. Now there's a 7-stage problem solving approach that's discussed in the booklet. I'll just highlight it here as I have, and also we'll highlight it verbally. Won't go into it too much. I want to discuss the 3 main models of decision making a bit more in depth, so I'll just refer you to the book for this. But generally the 7-stage model that you'll find in every session, you'll pretty much do it, is obviously getting an idea of what the problem is. From that point forward, trying to establish goals that are realistic, and also look at other ways of solving the same problem. So look at multiple solutions. Based on that, you look at those solutions and compare and evaluate, see which one works best. Based on that, you come up with one that seems feasible and appropriate in the circumstance. You actually then with the client come up with a plan, and there could be a contract in counseling to implement whatever solution you've come up with that seems to work best, and then evaluate. And those are steps that can happen in each session, but those are obviously also steps that happen in a whole sequence of sessions. Because ultimately, first session, client comes in, tells their problem. Very last session, whether it's 10, 100, or 1,000 sessions later, you want to evaluate the outcome. But every session allows itself to be dealt with in this 7-step process as well. You talk about stuff that's been discussed, look at new problems that may have arisen, find solutions, alternatives, prioritize, come up with a new plan, and then send them home with some new homework and evaluate the outcome in the session afterwards. So this goes for the big umbrella and for all the steps under the umbrella as well, if that makes sense. All right, this is something I'll just let go. I'm not going to discuss that too much. Have a read. I've highlighted a couple of things. Let me go back for you. I've highlighted a couple of things that I think are important here. Defining the problem, obviously, is the step of working with the client to determine what assistance they require. It's kind of self-evident, this one. Then realistic goals. Now, be careful with that one. And I see it happen in so many pracs. People become problem solvers, or counselors become problem solvers rather than solution facilitators. And that's one to keep in the back of your mind. We are not clients' problem solvers. We don't provide the magic pill. We do not have the magic wand. At least we don't have them, but we don't want to make our clients think we have them either. So be a facilitator. That's the word we're using here, and not a giver, a solution giver for the client. And a sort of helping desire, or whatever you want to call it, the desire to help people move forward is often one of those things that leads many counselors, student counselors, and even practicing counselors in sessions to start offering solutions. What if you would do this? Or let me tell you about a really good solution that another client found, without asking permission of the client to actually share those things. Generally, they're well meant. We mean well when we try and offer those solutions, but they're not in the client's best interest. Because as soon as we start taking on a consulting or a mentoring role for the client and say, look, dear client, this is something I know everything about. Let me tell you what the best solution for you in this circumstance is, blah, 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 blah. You're not self-empowering the client. You're just telling them what to do. And based on your expertise and maybe your authority or your influence, your client might take those steps to heart and do them, but you're not necessarily empowering to come up with their own solutions and own steps. So as soon as you disappear out of their lives, the impetus or the motivation to keep going according to what you told them to do will disappear, and they're back to square one. Okay, really simply, I'm going to cover this really briefly. How do you set goals? Well, you start with the problem, obviously. From the broad problem area, you go to a more specific problem area, and ultimately you go to more specific goals. Very self-explanatory. Just read through that one. You'll understand what that means. Now, supportive challenging, that's one that you'll come across in 002, the old 502A as well, that unit. Challenging is good, because that actually forces the client to think for themselves. If you can point out inconsistencies, and not necessarily pointing them out literally or figuratively speaking, but making the client realize that there is an inconsistency in what they say and what they do, then that could lead to further discussion and further clarification of goals. So simple things like, on the one hand you say this, but on the other hand you do that. Or on the one hand you say you would like to get back to work. On the other hand, you just told me that you really like your free time that much, that you're not sure if you can actually last in a working environment. How are you going to match those two things up, or how are you going to reconcile that? That's supportive challenging. You don't want to be a bully. You don't want to be disrespectful, but there is absolute value in pointing out inconsistencies in clients' words or in clients' words and actions. So use it. All right, we'll keep on going with that one. So here in sense of goal setting, you can read that goals generally develop quite broadly, and that's the way that I work it with my clients as well. I'll say, okay, you'd like to change your life. Great, that's a good goal. What areas of your life would you like to change on? Okay, your career. Great. Now we're getting a little bit more specific. So what more specifically in your career would you like to change? You'd like to change job industry and like to change job in that. Okay, cool. What specific industry are you working in, and what specific industry would you like to work in? All right, you'd like to work in counselling. Great. Okay. So what are you currently doing? Righto, you're actually in social services at the moment, more in community service, and you'd like to become a counsellor. That's awesome. What could be a real specific goal for you to start changing your role in community services to one of a counsellor? Well, sign up for the counselling diploma. Absolutely cool. That would become the specific goal. So from a person wanting to change their life, it becomes changing their career, and then ultimately from changing it from being a community service worker to becoming a counsellor, and that is a specific goal as such. Now, you've probably all heard of SMART goals before. I'm not going to go too deeply into that one. Specific, make them as specific as possible, have them measurable. Obviously, goal needs to be achievable, needs to be relevant for the client, it needs to be in context, and time is often a very good thing to have in there as well. Have a time frame on it. Now, what I always do with clients, and that's purely my way of doing stuff, is point out that the time is not a deadline type time. So it's not a big deal if they don't make it in time, but definitely start working towards a time that we come up with together. There's nothing wrong with being pressured a little bit, but I don't want you to start feeling a failure either, should you not make that time frame for whatever reason. So time put on a goal is more a guideline, a marker, whatever you want to call it, a milestone, rather than a deadline that needs to be achieved in order to be successful. So have a good old read about that one, and let's go through that one real quick. Multiple solutions, always a good idea. Why would you want to stick with one solution if there are more options available? Then obviously you evaluate and compare those solutions. You can read all that. That's easy enough. And then in the end, you come to a decision. Find the feasible, appropriate solution. And the last step is documenting that. Now, do you have to do that very formally, very officially? No. You can write it down in your case notes. When I did my life coaching training many years ago, there was a bit of a let's call it a cultural approach, or a sort of an idea within coaching that we should write up contracts, action plan contracts or results contracts. And I would have one. There's one where there would be a lot of blanks to be filled in, that would have the SMART goal in there, and then both the coach and the client would sign those. Now, you can do that. It's great. It sort of gives a bit of added accountability for both the client and the counselor/coach in that case. But do we really need to? No, I don't think so. As long as you document the client's decision, have good case notes of that, and maybe write them down in bullet point form or summarize them in an email to the client of what it is that they have now committed to do, that is a good contract. Contracts and plans don't have to be all formalized, but sometimes it can be good. So there's nothing wrong with maybe doing an online search for a good old counseling or action step contract or a goal contract, whatever you want to call it, and maybe using it every once in a while. There are clients that are fairly sensitive to that, and we'll thank you for it when you do. All right, moving on. That's all up to you. That's easy enough. Just keep flicking with me in your own learner guide. Now here's where it gets juicy. Decision-making models. I want to discuss all three, and that's all I do for this unit. The rest you can read yourself. But these ones are quite cool, all three of them actually, and I must admit I use all three of them. I wasn't aware of what they were going to put in this unit, obviously, up until the point they brought it out. And it was interesting to see that they brought out the stuff that I think every counsellor should use in their practice when it comes to decision-making models. They're widely taught, and that's how I came across them through my own studies and ongoing professional development. And it's great to actually now see them in a workbook or in a study guide, because they are useful. So without further ado, let's go into them. Keep scrolling with me in your own learner guide. Now the Zen Model. Here's where I added something to the good old learner guide. This is not in your learner guide, by the way. I just copied and pasted that in. Now the Zen Model is a cool model based on the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Now, I'm not sure if you ever heard of Myers-Briggs, but Catherine Cook and her daughter Isabel Briggs-Myers were two pioneers when it came to type indication or personality type profiling. They started their work in 1917s or somewhere in the early 1900s, mainly because they were interested in what makes people tick. Based on Carl Jung's stuff, if you're ever interested in learning stuff about personality and personality styles, you gotta dive into Carl Jung's stuff. It's fascinating stuff. So I'm very partial to this model and to Myers-Briggs type indicator. So I might become a little bit more enthusiastic about this thing. Now, Myers-Briggs type indicator splits us up in 16 distinct personality types, maybe even 32, maybe even 64 if you start working with subtypes. But that's beside the point of this learner guide a little bit. And a lot of people, as part of criticism, say that is pigeonholing people. And yeah, to a degree, it can be used to pigeonhole people. Who says that you are a certain way? We're human beings, so we're definitely not stuck to being a certain person. But there are traits that come out in us that are fairly consistent. If you watch me write stuff on a board and you ask me to put my pen down and pick the pen up and keep on writing and do that 5 times or 10 times or 50 times, after the 50th time, you can say with a fair bit of certainty that I'm a right-handed person. Why? Well, because every time I put my pen down and pick my pen back up, I'll do it with my right hand, most likely, unless I want to trick you, but probably not. So based on evidence, there is a lot to say for people's preferences, and this is a really simple one, my right hand for writing. But there are similar preferences when it comes to decision making, to taking information in, to our attitude in the world, and to our stance, when it comes to processing information and making decisions together. So not only decision making and not only information processing, but the combination of the both. There are ways of doing that are quite consistent in people, and Myers-Briggs were on that. Now the girl with the little ponytail type things or whatever you call them and the nice fluffy bits in there, she was ultimately the one who made the Myers-Briggs type indicator really big. And later on, a lady called Macaulay, I can't think of her first name, but her last name was Macaulay. She made it really, really big to the point that now I think it gets, the Myers-Briggs type indicator gets taken a couple of million times per year, mainly to help people get jobs, to find the right person for the right job. Now, for the Zen model, when it comes to counseling, the idea is that we try and help clients make decisions based on 4 steps. and that leads to a Z. Now, if you know a little bit more about Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and I strongly suggest you read up on it because it's fascinating stuff, and I'll do a workshop on that one day, just for my sheer pleasure and your entertainment too. The decision model says, look, when you are exploring facts and figures with clients, you want to integrate all of their intellectual capabilities. So initially, what you want to do is help clients gather all the facts and information, which is a very sensing thing to do. What are the facts? And that's S is one of the words in the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, stands for sensing. Once you've done that, once we got all the facts, which is a bit left-brained, you want to start looking at brainstorming ideas for the future. So where to from here, which is an intuitive task. Now, the word intuition in Myers-Briggs is signified by the letter N, and they had to do that because the letter I was already taken by the introverts and the extroverts, which is another way of looking at the world. So they had to use the N for intuition. But that's a way of looking towards the future and brainstorming. So not necessarily factual. It's more like what you would like, ideally. So a bit more dreaming into the future. Once you've done that, it's a good way to let your left brain loose on that one and see if that actually all makes sense, which is a very thinking task, which is the letter T. But ultimately, you don't want to stop there, because past that, you also want to find out whether that feels okay, whether that seems the right way for you, whether it sits right, which is very much a feeling consideration, therefore the letter F. Now, that leads to, in a way, a Z, or a Z in American English. And this is how it looks. Again, flick with me in your own learner guide and have a look at this while I take another swig of my coffee. So to summarize that one, I'm not sure if this wants to work the way I want it to work. Nah, it doesn't, obviously, but that's okay. Oh, here we go. Oh, it still doesn't want to do it. Oh, bummer. Okay, so sensing first, facts and figures from what is going on, what's currently happening, to what would you like to see, what are the possibilities, to then looking at that in a fairly rational way to ultimately come up with how does that sit with you, how do you feel about this. That's the Zen model. Now, read about all that. So it's gathering information first. That's what you do with the client. Consider the possibilities out there, what can be done. Become a bit analytical about it. Think. And then ultimately look at the values. How does it feel for you? That is a Zen model in a nutshell. And I think I'll stick to that one. Like I said, based on Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, even for the fun of it, just go through, do a Google on Myers-Briggs Type Indicator online test. Pick one with about anywhere between 60 and 100 questions, because there's 10 question ones and there's 240 question ones. But pick a short one, do it, come up with your own 4-letter code, send me the result, and I can give you quite an idea of how you operate and how you tick. So that's the Zen model in short. The decisional balance one is a cool one too. That's the second one that comes out of motivational interviewing. Now, motivational interviewing was a style of person-centered counselling that really came into vogue when dealing with people with alcohol abuse mainly, but drug abuse and substance abuse in general later on. So in the field of addiction. And all had to do with, first of all, building up a strong therapeutic alliance with the client, so having a lot of empathy. But then, what they found is that clients often were caught between a rock and a hard place. Like they can see themselves doing a certain thing, which is obviously sticking to their addiction, while also talking about what they would like, which is generally pretty much every addict would like to get rid of their addiction or have a better life. And the idea is that they're caught between these two fields. So motivational interviewing is a technique that allows clients to build or to elicit and build their own motivation for change rather than being stuck between these two options and not knowing which one to pick. And a good way to do that is actually by widening the gap between what is and what could be. So it's sort of rubbing salt in the wound in a loving manner, but you actually do that. So you build up the gap, or you say, well, how would you like your life to be? Well, this, that, and the other. Well, in what way isn't that the way now, in how far are you from it when you look at your own life. And then obviously from there you try and roll with resistance, because clients will be resistant toward making change, as we all are. But ultimately what you want to do is to have the client have autonomy about their own choices. They are the choice maker. They ultimately decide what's best for them in their lives, not you. MI, motivational interviewing. I don't think actually there's a lot of stuff in the units. Maybe I'll be surprised down the track. I know in the old diploma there wasn't much on motivational interviewing. It's a fascinating way of looking at counselling, and I think every counsellor should know about this. So do some research on MI, motivational interviewing. There's loads and loads of info on it. I've run classroom workshops on that. I'll probably narrate a PowerPoint at some point on motivational interviewing to give you some extra information on that one. It's fascinating stuff, and I mean it. It's really useful. It's very person-centered, very Carl Rogers, very helpful. All right, so this is a way to do decisional balance stuff, in a motivational interviewing way. You look at the benefits of making changes, the benefits of not making changes, the costs of making changes, and the cost of not making changes. And ultimately you try to sort of develop that bigger gap and help people come to a solution, hopefully ultimately looking at it being better to change because the cost of staying the same is too high and the benefits of changing are actually too good to let go. That's what you want to look at. And this is a worksheet that you can download online. There's plenty of them. Motivational interviewing sheets, that stuff is readily available. So do a good old Google on that and use it in your sessions. Right, that's all I'll talk about in the decisional balance stuff. Now the 4-option model, it's the third and last one that I'll discuss in this unit, is a technique that comes out of ACT. Now don't call it ACT because you'll get slapped around the ears by me. It's called acceptance and commitment therapy. So yes, it seems logical to call it ACT like you call it PCT and CBT. But Stephen Hayes, one of the founders of ACT, actually called it ACT because the idea is to act, do something. And that's how he wanted it to be. And that's why he called it ACT and not ACT. So if you want to become a counselor and be respected in your field, then you call it ACT. If you want to be laughed at by all the other counselors, keep calling it ACT and you will be just fine. Right, that's beside the point. Now, the 4-option model is really quick and easy. You have 4 options. If people are stuck or not stuck, if people are in a problem situation, there's 4 ways you can deal with that one. Either you can do nothing, really. Hopefully things will change, and that's option 4 in a sense. The other radical is just walk away from it completely. The second option would then be, stay in that problematic situation, see what you can change. And the other option would be stay and work on acceptance what can't be changed, because some things just can't be changed. If you are ill or you're disabled, or ill to the point that you can't change that, you might have some illness that you just can't change. Or you might be confronted with an accident, for instance, in which you lose, let's use a gruesome example, the use of your legs. That's something you can't change. And then the best way is to work on acceptance of what can't be changed. And that's still a very valuable therapeutic way of dealing with the situation. But, ideally, obviously, you would like to leave the situation and make things better, or stay and change what can be changed, do something about it. And that's the 4-option model. Now, neither of these are necessarily better than the other, although option 4 is usually not the best one. But in a way, they could all work. They can all work. It just depends on what a person wants to do with it. If you don't like a situation, but you can change the situation, well, great, do it. But if you can't change the situation, you might want to change, might as well change the way you look at it, so at least you'll feel slightly better. So I'm not going to make too much of a fuss of the 4-option model, but it's a good way to broaden people's thinking. And that's broaden people's thinking. That's the whole idea behind this. People generally can't see past their problems. And if you can help them see past their problems and see that they actually have multiple opportunities, at least 4, then people's brains often start to click into gear and start generating better opportunities for themselves, at least better than what they were thinking of before. And that's the good way of, looking at the 4-option model. I don't think there's much that I want to say about that one. No, that's it. Now, I'm not going to go into this one, practice considerations, too much. You can just read up on it. It's an easy topic. I want to keep this workshop to about half an hour. So the core of 007 is really, how can we help clients who come in with a certain problem and can't see past their problem? How can we help them broaden their perspective and give them options, or help them create options in their own life? Well, there are many, many, many ways to do that, but the 3 models that are discussed here are really good ways to actually help a client do that. And like I said, they're really powerful, and all 3 come from theoretical backgrounds like motivational interviewing and ACT and the Myers-Briggs type indicator that are researched and very effective in helping people move further and to understand the situation or understand themselves a lot better. So useful stuff. So have a good old read. If you got questions about this, let me know. The practicals around this unit will be pretty much on obviously helping clients to build decisions and set goals, and an application of these 3 models, which is really what it's all about. So keep studying hard, guys. I love all the assessments that come in. Keep doing the good work. We need counselors badly in the world, so keep going and become one. You can join me. It's good fun. It's a very rewarding industry. And keep studying hard and keep learning, because learning is the only way we can get better at what we're doing, and obviously practice. So that's it for me. Next week I'll discuss 003, and that should be it for me today. Have a good one.